So, hey, this is Yazuki Wolf, and today is going to be another short episode in our Japan Quest podcast thingamajig. I'm going to have to be going to work again today, probably in the next like 20 minutes or so. So I got a pre-recording that's about, I think it's about a 30-minute pre-recording or something. I'm not really sure, but I guess we'll do the podcast for as long as this pre-recording is going, and then once this is over, then I'm going to have to head out. So the reason why I have to go to work again this Sunday afternoon is because hopefully tomorrow we'll be applying for what you calls it. We'll be applying with the Apple Store for our game to be released coming February. Probably February 2nd is what we're aiming for. But so for preparation for that, today we're going to be taking care of all the bugs and things that we had going, because I don't know if you remember, but in the last episode I mentioned that I had to go to work because we had added a whole new sort of like tile system to the game, and I had to add those to pardon me, like I just woke up, so I still have that like morning type of voice. But so we had to add like the new tiles to the game. And that was something that I had to edit the 300 plus quests that we had already set up in the game, had to be edited, and like the levels had to be redesigned. So I redesigned all those levels, and we played through some of those during the week, and we found some bugs that were coming up where the game was stopping, or like you wouldn't be able to access a level or things like that. Pardon me. Right. So I spent yesterday and the day before that, like Friday and Saturday here. I'm not sure what day it is over there, but I spent that time fixing all those bugs, just going through all the coding and stuff. It's kind of like funny. Is like I think last night I remember having a dream where the contents of the dream was me looking at an Excel document and just putting numbers into it. It's probably one of the most boring dreams I've ever had. But yeah, so like that's basically been my last like this whole week, just fixing numbers in Excel documents and then putting those up to a server. And let's see here, where was I? Yeah, so I think I got most of the bugs taken care of, at least in the main quest line. There's like some special event quests too that they have, and you see here in the pre-recording, I bring up Pose Maniacs. That's the site that I use a lot of times to. There's just a little bit of a side, but that's a site I use a lot to do free sketching to warm up in the morning. I really wish I could turn my line off. It keeps beeping at me, but anyways. But so like I very much recommend this site for doing like morning warm-up sketches. It's really great because you could just like set it up to do every 30 seconds or every 90 seconds or every minute or something. It'll just like switch the pose, so you could just sit there looking at the website while you're drawing. So I kind of did the double. I put both of the website and my drawing on the same screen, so you could see. Usually I have two monitors, so I'd have the website on a different monitor while I'm working on the other monitor with the full space for the like Shintic tablet. But just so you could see exactly what it is that I was drawing, I brought that over. But so yeah, where was I? Yeah, so I got most of the main quests all taken care of, I think. But we still have to actually play through all the quests and make sure that they're all still accessible and everything. So that's going to be what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to be fixing up the remaining bugs in the special event quests, and then just making sure that the regular main quests are okay. I'm really hoping those ones are okay, because if they aren't, then I don't know what the issue is, and I'll have to spend more time like trying to figure that out and looking through more numbers, lots and lots of numbers. But yeah, so today's topic is going to be like, what exactly do I do as a game designer? And we may not have enough time to cover it in depth, so we may have to make this a two-parter or maybe a three-parter. I'm not sure, but we'll just see how the time runs down. Next week, I'm pretty sure I won't have to go to work, so I'll probably be able to do a longer podcast next week. But for today, we're just going to do about 30 minutes. And so, so what exactly do I do as a game designer? It's a little hard to say definitively, because it seems like the position of game designer, there's kind of some disagreement about what exactly that is a lot of the time, it seems. And part of that's because of like a language thing, where generally what we refer to as game designer outside of Japan doesn't have the same meaning inside of Japan. I think now it sort of is starting to have the same meaning because of the way the game industry has kind of blown up, and like there's that more of like a world international type mentality to it. But originally, um, the term designer, this is just me quoting stuff I've read online, so this isn't actually from a real like experience. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But from what I read, it sounds like outside of Japan, a game designer, or the word designer is referred to the person who determines the contents of a game. So a person who decides what type of game they're going to make and like what the game's going to be about, like the overall like concept and image and concept of the game. I said concept twice, but oh well. But that's what we would associate a game designer as. But I guess when games were being made in Japan originally, it's kind of gaming was seen as more of like a toy type of. It was kind of what do you call it? Comparable to the toy industry. So the word designer didn't seem to make sense in terms of designing the contents of a toy, I guess, is sort of how the thinking was. Oh, and just another quick aside, now the pre-record video switched to the illustration I'm doing of They Bleed Pixels, and this is just a personal work. It has nothing to do with my job or anything, but it's just a cool game that I liked playing. So if you like torture platformers, you should check out They Bleed Pixels. And this is an illustration I'll probably have finished in the next like week or so, but it's been fun drawing it. But so yeah, what was I saying? Where was I? Let's see, we were talking about these sides are throwing me off. So we were talking, yeah, so what the word designer means. So they didn't really see it as the right word to say about the contents of like of what basically was seen as like a toy, because it was kind of being comparable to the toy industry. And so they came up with another word called planner. And so a planner, which as far as I know, isn't really a word that we use outside of Japan. I haven't actually worked outside Japan, so I could be wrong. But from what I know, I don't think it's what you use outside Japan. And planner basically replaced the word designer in pardon me, in Japan. So in Japan, the person who decides the contents of a game was called the game planner, and designer, the word designer, that was applied to the people who actually made the way that something looks, the way that the people who design how something looks were called designers. So in Japan, you have a 2D designer, you have a 3D designer. So I think outside Japan, you probably call it a 2D artist or 3D artist. I'm not sure, but basically the word designer inside Japan became synonymous with 2D art. So the person who's doing 2D art is called a designer. And so it makes it kind of hard to really pinpoint what a game designer is, because of all this kind of confusion with like terminology. Because now, because of the international type scope of things, the word game designer is coming back into Japanese companies as well. But then you still have the relic of the word game planner, which is still being used now, and you still have the use of designer to mean 2D artist, which is still being used now. So like for example, in my company, we don't have 2D artists, we have 2D designers and 3D designers. And it always kind of threw me off a little bit. And I didn't understand why until like just recently I looked up on the internet about that history, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why it didn't seem quite right. But yeah, like for some reason, that's how it works here. So like, for example, at my job, if a new person comes to work and everyone has to introduce themselves on the first day, like you have the 2D artists, they'll always introduce themselves as like, oh, hi, I'm a designer such and such, like put their name here, like I'm designer Tanaka or something. I'm just making that up. That's not actually a person that works with me, but I'm designer something. And so then it would come around to me, and I was like, well, I do 2D art, but more than that, I'm actually do the concept and the whole thing of the game. So like, I came to the point where I started introducing myself as game designer. I'd be like, I'm the game designer of Archetype. And a lot of times when I'm doing English podcasts and stuff too, I'll say like I'm the lead game designer of Archetype. So I think that's probably the best description of it. And so in that case, I'm using game designer in the way that it's used outside of Japan, which is now starting to be used in Japan, but isn't completely perfectly used in Japan, if that makes any sense. But so it seems like almost there's like this right now, as far as I can see within like my workplace, there's a difference between designer and game designer. So designer means 2D art, game designer means means planner basically. But the other thing that kind of makes it a little bit more confusing is that so originally you had game designer, and then the word game designer was replaced with game planner, right? But now game designer is coming back, and as it's coming back, I've noticed that there were some websites where like showing like how things worked at different companies inside Japan and stuff, and it seems like some companies are actually splitting up the two. So now game designer doesn't equal planner necessarily. Now you have game designer and game planner, and so the game designer, the way there was a really good like graphic of it on one of the Japanese game job sites, and I tried to find it before I came on, but I couldn't find it again. So I don't know, if I find it in the future, I might bring it up in a different podcast. But like basically, what do you call it? Basically, it's laid out where like the game designer was a person who came up with the original concept of the game, and then he or she hands it over to the planners, and then the planners, like the planning team, they're the ones that do all like the sort of like paperwork and getting everything like getting all like all the details fleshed out, so they could then hand it over to the designers, who would be the 2D designers, 3D designers, to then make those things. And so like it seemed like they kind of added game designer as like a step above game planner, and oh, that seemed pretty cool to me. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try to get my position to be something like that. And that kind of leads me to, I guess, another point is that when I say get my position to be like that, what I mean is my company is still fairly small, the place that I work at. When I first joined, I think I was like the 11th member or the 12th. I don't remember exactly, but there's like 10, 12 people when I first came. And now we're approaching 30. And so we've almost tripled in size since I started there about 2 years ago. So during those 2 years, there's been a lot of kind of fluctuation of exactly what I do, because of that, it being a very small new company, and a lot of what I get to do is kind of determined by what I say that I want to do, because you kind of have to create your job in a way, because nothing's really been defined yet. Things are starting to get defined more and more as time goes on, and now I think we're starting to I don't know if crystallize would be the right word, but we're starting to like form together into actual like permanent structure. But at the beginning, it was very amorphous, and so my position right now is probably something of a combination of the 2D designer, because I do 2D design stuff, and game planner, because I do game planning work. But then I'm also trying to create like a third position for myself as sort of like a concept artist, or like a concept designer, if I can make that as sort of like a new position. I don't know if that's actually a thing or not, but where basically I'm kind of the one who comes up with the initial concepts for, like, for example, for the game Archetype, which we're making right now. The original concept of that game was mine. It's transformed a lot over these 2 years, partially because of influence of other planners and other people working with it, and also just like of my boss's like vision of what he wanted to do with it. But yeah, so like that, I had that original concept, and then that concept kind of took its own path. But then even now, as we take it to new directions, like say there's something that isn't working in the UI, or something's not quite right here, my boss will give it to me to come up with a concept for how to fix it. And so it's kind of similar to a planner in that a planner would figure out a way to fix the problem, but it has the added step of that as a sort of concept designer. I would then I not only just come up with the solution, but I then actually make a 2D graphic representation of what that solution will look like. So like I'll do like a not like a finished illustration or anything, but say I'll take like a screenshot of the battle, and I'll draw in what I want it to look like, and then I would like kind of send that over to the 2D designers and say like, okay, you see in this illustration, make it like that. And then so it's sort of like, it's kind of cool because I found that I have a strength in concepts and designs, but not so much in completely realizing something to its final state, because I think I get bored of things pretty quickly. I'll get started at it, and like halfway through, I'm like, okay, I wish it was finished, you know. So as sort of that, in that sort of like concept design type of position, which is something I'm just trying to build for myself. I don't know if that's something that actually exists in other companies or not, but like in that position, I get to come up with that concept. I get to sketch it out real quick, like as and make like basically like a concept art of what the game should look like, and then I just hand it over to the designers, and then they make it like that, and then I get to just like double check their stuff when they're done. And so it seems like right now my position is sort of like I'm like in charge of the overall image of the game and the concepts while doing the planning work as well. So yeah, so that's sort of how my positions kind of like become a combination of a number of other positions. But now just talking about specifically about what I've been doing over these 2 years or so. At first, when I came into the company, I started working on Archetype, the board game. So I made a couple, because I originally when I came into the company, I think I mentioned this in my other stream, but like one of the big things that got me at the job was that I had designed a 2D trading card game, and I actually brought that to the interview and showed that I had this fully functioning working game. So the first thing that he wanted me to do was to make an actual board game for their company. So I came up with the concepts for Archetype, and then we started test playing that with like, just printing out paper and stuff, and just having the game, like making some prototypes of the game and like playing through it. And once again, that the concept for that changed a lot too, because originally I think it was like something really simple. Like it was just it was like a 1 to 2 player game with, and the only components you needed was cards and like two markers just to show what your avatar, I guess, in the game, so you can move it around. But then like that went to like, oh well, we kind of want to make it more like the games that are out, the mobile games that are out there right now. So like if you look at mobile games in Japan, there's some themes that you see coming up over and over again. One is collectability. So they wanted it to be like have like something collectible. So you couldn't just have one character to be yourself. You had to have a team of characters that you could collect and party together and stuff. So it became like 1 versus 1 to having like a whole party of people versus another whole party of people. And then what was the other thing? The other thing that they wanted was collectability. And then the other thing you see a lot is elements. So when I say elements, I mean like fire, earth, water, thunder, all that, like the Pokemon type stuff, where like, this element's strong against this element, and that element's strong against that element. So now we had to add like elements to it. And I think we added elements to the different characters, and we even added elements to different tiles and things, and we just started adding stuff like that. And then I remember we ended up adding like equipable items and like HP bars. Like originally the game, you didn't even have like an HP bar because it wasn't really meant to be like an RPG. It was just like a really simple like board game. But so then we added all the RPG elements, like hit points, specials. There were spells in the original game, but like I don't know, we just had to add all the RPG elements and everything. And it got to the point where it's just like this big like balloon of all this stuff that's in all these games, and it burst because it just wasn't functional anymore. So I ended up having to, at one point I scrapped the original thing, and I came to work the next day with like a redesigned game, basically based on some of the elements that we had before, and just tried to simplify it. And so that it took a pretty different direction after that. So the original game, something that hasn't been, the original concept, I don't think has been realized, and that's something that I might want to try to bring back in the future, because I really did like the original concept. But that's sort of like a part of the learning process, was that when I first came, I kind of saw my job as being the position of following the directions of my boss, basically. But as I've been there longer, I found that my job as a game designer isn't so much just following directions. I have to be able to listen to directions, and I have to be able to say no when I don't think it's right. And that's something that is kind of new to me, because I think before this, all the work I did before, it was in like, just like what do you call it, commercial industries and stuff, or like just part-time jobs. This is actually my first like real full-time, well, hard to describe, but let's just say that in the past, like with my old part-time jobs and stuff, you just, if your boss says that he wants you to say this phrase to a customer when they come in, you just say that phrase. You don't have to like say like, oh no, that will make the customer like that. You don't have to like think that much about it. You just follow what your boss tells you to do, and if you follow the directions well, you generally are a good employee. But as a game designer, that's not necessarily the case, because sometimes you as a game designer understand things that your boss doesn't, because he's just kind of telling you an overall, like maybe he sees this thing in other games that he thinks would be cool in our game, so he just tells you to put it in. But then you have to be able to really look at it and see, is that really viable or not. So I think the way that my position there has kind of changed is that in the past, where if my boss tell me to put something in the game, I would just do it. And sometimes it'd be like, oh, I don't know how this is going to work, but that's what my boss wants, so I'm just going to work with it and see what I can do. But a lot of times what happens there is that it ends up not working. And this is it was kind of a little of a shock to me, but like when it doesn't work, and down the line, like if something your boss told you to do doesn't work and it like messes up the game, it's not your boss's responsibility. You think you could be like, oh, well, my boss told me to do that, but no, it's your responsibility, like as the game designer. So that's something I had to realize over time, is that if I put something in the game, even if it's something that my boss told me to put into it, if that doesn't work, it's not on my boss, it's on me. So then I started realizing, okay, I have to take responsibility for whatever I do in the game personally, and not just like pass that responsibility over to my boss or something, because they're not going to take it. It's going to be on me in the end. So the kind of way things have changed there is that before, where I was just like taking whatever they told me to do and I just did it. Now it's whenever they tell me just to do something, I take that as sort of like a question of, is this viable? And I have to think about it. And if I think it's viable, then I'll say, like, okay, yeah, I think I could do that. Yeah, I'll get you that right away. But if I don't think it's viable, then I bring that up and I'll say like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. And then you have to bring up all the reasons why. And that's been a bit, I won't lie, that's been a bit of a struggle, because sometimes you get into arguments and stuff, because a lot of times the people who want to put things into it or want to do certain things, sometimes they only see it from their side of the perspective. Like they don't see the full aspects of the whole game. They just see like, well, if it was like this, my work on this side will be easier, or my work on this side will go smoother. So why can't you just do that, But like you're looking at the whole game and saying like, well, yeah, that would make that easier, but that's going to affect this area and this area and that area. And so it's been a kind of growing experience to be able to take that responsibility and be able to make those decisions. But I feel like that could be like a whole nother topic, and this might be going a little bit off of what we wanted to do. I want to keep this a little bit more focused for today. But so that's just like one aspect of it, the whole designing aspect. And so I made the Archetype, the board game. And if you're interested in finding out more about Archetype, please go ahead and look at one of the links below. I think I have like the link for the promotional video on YouTube for our digital version. And I think that in the digital version, there's a link to the Facebook page. And on the Facebook page, it should have all the older versions too, like the board game and everything. But yeah, so that was the first year was basically designing the board game. And we debuted that in Japan, and then we brought it to America at what's that convention called? Indianapolis. It's such a big thing. Why am I brain farting right now? Gen Con, yep. So we brought that over to Gen Con, and Gen Con was freaking awesome, man. I wish I could go back there. I mean, we're gonna be going there every year for work, but I kind of wish I could go there and not work, because it just seemed like such a freaking awesome like convention. And since when you're working, you can't really experience most of it, because you have to be up at a certain time every morning, and you have to be at your booth all day and stuff. But yeah, that was a really cool event. And so we debuted it there, and my boss has been working on getting it on Amazon so that people out abroad, and I think America, but maybe outside of America too. I'm not exactly sure how Amazon does their regions or whatever, but yeah, my boss is working on getting the board game up on Amazon, so you can buy it there, and or if he doesn't get that up in time, you could buy it at Gen Con next year in Indianapolis. But yeah, that seems to be taking a little bit longer than he originally assumed. But yeah, hopefully that'll be up soon. And so that was the board game. And then after finishing the board game, this company is originally it's a mobile gaming company, and so the idea was to make a board game and then convert that over to a board game and then convert that over to a digital game. So now we're working on the digital game. And so in terms of what I was working on during the board game time, first I made the design for the what you calls it. I made the concept for the game and then made prototypes. And the board game was mostly me, apart from like some stuff that came out afterwards. Like, but most of like the illustrations and things, and actual putting the game together, like that was mostly me because everyone else was kind of busy on other stuff, and we were still a small company at that time, so no one else really had time to work on it. So like, I like the art and stuff for the board game for the first like year or so. I was like drawing a good amount of the art. It was me and one other artist. And so you could like play a game and just try to look at the board game's art and see if you could figure out which ones I drew and which ones were drawn by the other Japanese guy. But like that was like the first year or so was just first it was half a year of coming up with the concept and making prototypes, and then another half year of drawing the art for the game. And that's sort of like when I was talking to you before about the moe style and how I was kind of trying to figure out how to incorporate that and make my stuff more appealing to like a Japanese audience and things like that. Was what I was doing for most of that time, just trying to get that art done for the Archetypes board game. And you know, I'm saying board game a lot because that's what they call it here a lot, but it's really not a board game. It's really a tabletop game because you don't actually have a board. But yeah, so let me just correct that now before someone corrects me in comments or anything. But like, yeah, it's Archetype it's the Archetype tabletop game. Yep. And so that I was doing art for that. So that's kind of similar to what happened then with the digital, is that for the first half year or so, we were working on the prototype, and then after that we started doing the art. But the digital had some other hiccups that I may go into possibly in the next video, because I think that we're running out of time on this reel, and I think I need to start to get going. So let me just kind of wrap up my thoughts about the board game, and then I'll go into the digital for part 2 next week. But so the board game I think went pretty smoothly, and I think a lot of that is because there wasn't a lot of like okay. When you talk about mobile games, there already is like a precedent of what mobile games look like in Japan. But board games, it's still very much a niche market here, and there's a lot more freedom of what you can do. Because I think for the most part, I myself as a designer, I want to make games for like core gamers. That's sort of like what's at my heart, is more like I want to make games for people. I want to make games that I wish were out there. And since I'm kind of like, I've been like an old school gamer, I've been playing games for a long time, I'm really attracted to those games that have new interesting elements to them. And so I guess I'm kind of more fit for niche markets, because I'm not really good at making a game. I don't want to say I'm not good, but like I don't particularly enjoy putting things into games that are meant to just target everyone. Like for me, I really want to target just the people who I know will like this particular genre of a game. So like when if I'm making a strategy RPG board game or like tabletop game, I know what that market's like. I know what people who play strategy RPG board game or like tabletop games are like, so I could design a game for them. And the sort of concept behind the Archetype, the tabletop game, was sort of like people possibly like me who have a background of playing tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, but now in their adult life don't have the time to play a fully stretched out campaign or something. So it's like a sort of a condensed version that's sort of like a miniature game that's condensed to make it a very short, quick game that you could play, and you could play with people and introduce other people to that aren't necessarily like a hardcore tabletop RPG people. So it's sort of like, that's just like a miniature game light, somewhere in between a light game and a miniature game. But so yes, to make it easier, it's somewhere in between a trading card game and a miniatures game. That's basically what the concept was. In between trading card game like Yu-Gi-Oh and a miniatures game like Warhammer, somewhere in between there is basically what we were shooting for. And so like I kind of understood that niche, that market, and what people would be looking for in that. Like, I know like a lot of people don't like trading card games anymore because of the sort of pay to win elements. So we try to make it more like a living card game where it's or an expandable card game. Like I knew the sort of those types of things to what I need to put into it and what I need to do with it. And so it was a little bit more direct in what I wanted to do. But then when you come over to the mobile side, which we'll go into more in the next video, you're not working for a niche market anymore, because now it's about getting as many downloads as possible and getting as many people to play as possible. So now you have to think of like how to not just work with one niche market, but to make it work for everyone. And that becomes a lot more difficult. And I'll go into those issues in the next video. But yeah, in terms of the board game of Archetype, I think it came out pretty well. I still think it could be a lot better, but that's mostly just a time restraint issues, and I think that's something that designers generally have to live with. Is that you can always make your work better. It's even not even designers, but even just like artists. Like once that point when you know that you can't put any more strokes onto your art without and that will make it better. Like what's that point where you know that one more stroke or one more line is only going to make the overall piece worse, so you know that you're finished. Like for the most part, you're always going to feel like I could do a little bit more. I could put a little bit more time into this. I could do a little bit more to this. I could do a little bit more to that. There's always this continued like what'd you call it? There's always this continuation there. It looks like we're out of time, but I'm going to just finish this thought. So there's always this sort of like this possible growth that you could have, but then there's the time restraint that you need to finish at some point. And so that's sort of like what happened with Archetype, is that I think it could be a lot better, and I'd like to do expansions in the future. But because of the time restraint and our need to get the digital version running, we had to finish it up when at that time, and had to leave some things that I wanted to add to it. We had to leave undone. And I'm hoping that we could put those into expansions in the future, but a lot of that depends on how well the original one sells. And like I'm hoping that we sell enough to be able to justify doing more expansions and things in the future. But at any rate, we will be making other board games and bringing those to other digital forms as well. So that's about all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and see you again next week. Yoroshiku.